What about it?
Like you don't want anything. I think it should be you in your own mind, and you should have you control your own thoughts, not letting anyone else dictate it.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I want you to recognize about transcendentalism is, one, they are about the individual, and it's not weird individualism. Like, it's not like, even though Thoreau went to live in the woods, right, it is not a, like, weird obsession of, like, going into the woods and being, like, this loner. The value that they find in individualism is the power and strength that you have within yourself, right? And it's the idea that as an individual, you are responsible for your own thoughts, your own feelings, and your own actions. And when we can make morally conscious decisions on our own that are good for us, when we make a decision that's good for us, it ends up being good for society as well, right? But we're going to be concerned about us first rather than society, okay? What else did we learn about transcendentalism? Yeah, so it's like the divinity of nature. So they weren't concerned or consumed by material things. They found their religious connection, their spiritual connection to nature, because they found that that is the most pure thing that they can surround themselves with, is nature. And it's so cheesy, but like that's why I love the mountains, I think, so much, is because when I go to the mountains, I feel like I'm a completely different person when I come back because of just being away from everything else. I hate you, technology. So and I would say that they are I say this with an air of discretion and a little bit of like, take this with a grain of salt. They were the hippie granola types before hippies and granolas were, like, granola was a thing, right? Like, he was for sure in the minority. Anything else that you learned about with transcendentalism?
I guess this kind of goes in an individual, but their knowledge comes from themselves and not from, like, other people's learning.
Yeah, it's the idea that, like, they do not believe in, like, this hive mind. They do not believe in, like, mob mentality. And mob not meaning like attacking, but like this mob mentality of what everybody else thinks. The value and the self-worth they find when they make their own decisions based on their own feelings and emotions. So part of the reason also why I had you do some background on transcendentalism and on Thoreau was because I know we left rhetorical analysis last quarter. However, we're still revisiting rhetorical analysis, and we're going to do a little bit of it here. So when we approach this, Thoreau is difficult to read, but we have to keep in mind like what his rhetorical situation is. So now we know like his beliefs and his understandings when we understand the idea of transcendentalism. But now let's actually look at like the situation, the context at which he is writing this in. So this was written in 1849. So we're talking, 70 years after the creation of our country. So our government has been battle tested, we'll say, right? It is established for some good purposes, and it is efficient at what it's doing at the point. But what is it that we know, that you learned about Thoreau and the current situation when he was writing this? Like, what was happening? What got him in trouble? Like, what did he do or not do?
Slavery and the Mexican War.
Those were things that were happening. Okay. What else?
He didn't pay the tax.
So the president at this time was Polk, right? And the Mexican-American War and slavery were all happening. And so he refused to pay the poll tax, right? Why? So did he say, I'm not paying taxes because I don't agree with the war? Why? But why the taxes? Why not pay the taxes?
Because they gave into the war.
Yeah. So he understood that his taxes went to fund things that he felt were immoral. right? So he refused to pay his taxes. Now, this is where we get on the idea of civil disobedience. He was not the first to create civil disobedience, but he was the first to really become wildly known for civil disobedience. You've heard civil disobedience before, I hope. Yes? Where and with who? So Gandhi got the idea and followed the idea from Thoreau, and then after Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. So Gandhi used it throughout his life, but especially in the salt marches, right? But then also Martin Luther King Jr., who we're going to read next week, used it throughout like all of his studies. And this is the idea of like this nonviolence. So being civilly disobedient, being disobedient means like you don't agree, like you go against something. Being civil means that you are acting morally correct, right? Okay, so that's kind of where we are with the rhetorical situation. Let me show you how I laid this out because it looks a little different than what we're used to. So what I did is, this is a part, like this is the first like fourth about of the whole essay. What I did is I went through and I annotated it myself, and then what I did is in the middle is the passage, obviously, and then on the right what I did is I created like questions that guide you to see what I need you to see, what I annotated for, right? So you'll see the questions are what I want you to see in the annotations. On the left, you're going to have to leave room for a couple of things for like our side annotations. But let's talk about, I think Thoreau is difficult to read. And I think Thoreau is difficult to read for two reasons. One, I think the complexity of the sentence structure is difficult. But two, I think the real reason why Thoreau is difficult to read is because just the idea of transcendentalism and their beliefs is so lofty that we've got to understand what his perspective is and what his beliefs are and how that impacts what he's saying. So when we read something of difficulty, which we have done a few times in here, what are some strategies that I've given you that we use when we read something difficult? Besides annotating.
Define words that we don't know.
So that's the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to work our way backwards, right, and define words. And so that's part of what the left side is going to be used for, is to define terminology or define vocabulary. It's not terminology, to define vocabulary. What else? How else do we work through difficult pieces? It's not a rhetorical question. I'm waiting for an answer.
Did you say defining, like besides paraphrasing?
We work through paraphrasing, yes. But how do we work through paraphrasing?
Like each sentence?
Yeah, each sentence. So we're going to work through in small chunks, right? So when we read something of difficulty, especially when we know syntactically sentence structure is difficult, we work on sentence by sentence. We look for periods. Within those periods, we also look for if there is a semicolon, because a semicolon separates two complete thoughts. We stop there, right? And then within those semicolons, if there are multiple commas, meaning there are multiple descriptors or multiple lists, then we work within that, right? So we work from a period to a semicolon down to individual commas, right? That's kind of how we chunk things small. Okay, so let's start at the bottom of this paragraph and work our way backwards. What words do we need to define working from the bottom up? We need to define it if we can't even say it. Inexpedient and expedient. Anything else? Systematically. I think that's good. I'm going to go up here and also, we're going to define civil disobedience, obviously, because it is in our title. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the side, and I usually get really messy, right? And I just draw arrows from things. So for definitions, I'm going to try to be a little bit neater today. And I'm going to go ahead and jot down where all right. So if you are not one that usually contributes because you don't know what to say, your contribution when we're doing this can be definitions. So I need these definitions. Which one do you have?
All this is mine.
Okay. Okay.
I guess civil disobedience.
Okay. All right. Give me civil disobedience.
Civil disobedience is the active, professed refusal of a citizen to obey laws, commands, orders, or commands.
I got up to the professed refusal. The act of a professed refusal.
Of a citizen to obey laws,
Okay.
demands, orders, or commands.
Does it go further into like what it is, what else it is?
Or any authority.
What is there anything after that?
No, it's just like a quick Wikipedia.
Okay. The purpose is to like change something, right? Like when you are disobedient, you aren't disobedient just to be standoffish. You're disobedient because you don't agree with something, which means you need something changed.
So most of the time, non-violent.
Yeah, there's what I'm looking for. Because to be civil means that you act with some like regard for other people, right? All right, other definitions?
Systematically.
Okay.
According to a fixed plan or system of thought.
Okay. Expedient.
Of an action convenient and practical, although possibly improper or immoral.
Convenient or what?
And practical, although possibly improper or immoral.
Expedient means convenient and practical, although possibly improper or immoral. What does inexpedient mean?
Not practical, suitable, or advisable.
All right. I'm looking at the idea of a motto because we have to do that. What is a motto? Like, what can we quickly define a motto as? It's a saying. Yeah, it's a saying that represents your belief or represents a belief or a common understanding. All right. So what I do, so the way that I'm working through it is the same way that I suggest y'all. Like, go through, find your words, define your words first. Then I want to look at and go, okay, as I'm reading, this is what I'm looking for. paraphrase Thoreau's motto, paraphrase what Thoreau also believes. What is the basic assertion that Thoreau makes in the paragraph? Okay, so as we read, here we go. I heartily accept the motto that government is best which governs least. All right, so you'll see me abbreviate HDT, which is Henry David Thoreau. So what does that mean? A government is best which governs the least.
That wasn't the least involved in like the people's like.
So what is their role? To what? The best government is that government is best which governs the least. Yeah, so the best government is one like that doesn't intrude, but still leads. And I should like to see it acted up to more rapidly and systematically. What can we infer about the current government then? If he's saying that government is best which governs least, and I should like to see it acted up to more rapidly and systematically. It is his motto, right? So what can we infer about the current government? If he says, I wish that it could, that my motto or this motto, I should see it more rapidly and systematically. It intrudes too much. We can infer that the current government or is too controlling. So I think we have to look at what I think is difficult about Thoreau is that we have to look at what he's saying, but also what we need to infer to understand what he's saying, right? Carried out, it finally amounts to this, which I also believe, that government is best, which governs not at all. So Thoreau also believes what? Government is best, which governs not at all.
People, order, or power. Not governing at all, like not having any influence.
So no influence, but notice that he's not an anarchist, right? He's not saying the best government is no government. That's not what he says. He's saying that we need a government, but govern is an action. Government is a thing. So the best government is one that governs not at all. That we're society what? Okay. Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean I don't think utopian as in everything's perfect, but there's no need to step in. So also believes kind of like the government shouldn't need to act. Right? Govern is an action. So are you having flashbacks back to rhetorical analysis? Govern is an action. So we have to take the idea of the government being an entity and governing as being two different things. The government can create laws and do that, but we don't necessarily need it to govern when we are governing ourselves. But look at what the next part says. Government is best, which governs not at all. And when men are prepared for it, that will be the kind of government which they will have. What's the key word in there? When they are prepared. So he believes that a government should not need to act. However, what do we infer from that? We are not prepared to govern ourselves. When men are prepared for it, that will be the kind of government which they will have. So, however, society is not prepared, I don't want to say prepared, like, not ready to govern themselves. And I think that's a concession that he's making. Like, here is the best. So ultimately what he's saying is like we are too dependent on the government. So it's almost like he's saying, like, we're at fault. Now, does that fit with the idea of transcendentalists? Yeah, because the transcendentalist believes that as an individual, if we are all responsible for ourselves and we are making decisions that are right for us, that will impact the good of society. Therefore, we don't need a government to act on us, because as individuals, we are prepared to govern ourselves. But right now, we continue to be so dependent on the government. Yes, ma'am. Hello. Yeah, can I send them towards the end of class? Okay. All right. Fran, go see Miss Trout at the end of class. Do you know who she is? Okay. So I think that's what I think is really important, is that idea that, like, the when. We're not prepared for it. We have to be prepared for it. We just aren't. All right, so look at the next part. Government is at best but an expedient. So let's stop there because we continue. An expedient being something convenient, but also something immoral. So government is convenient. And convenience, let's say, because an expedient is a thing, right? So being expedient means to quickly do something, to get something done. But an expedient is a thing. So government is but a convenience for us. It's a convenience. It's also immoral at times. But most governments are usually, and all governments are sometimes, inexpedient. My brain already hurts. That's why I had 5 shots of espresso today to get me through. I knew I was going through Thoreau today, so I had to prepare. And it didn't even impact me. I already need a Celsius. Okay, so the first part is government is at best a convenience. Let's look at this next part. But most governments are usually what? I have to break this up into, like, usually what? Most governments are usually inexpedient. So I have to break them into parts because, so the next part is most governments are usually inexpedient. Because I have to separate these into, like, kind of different ideas. And then that last part is all governments are sometimes inexpedient. So we're looking for, they all end in the same idea of being not practical, right? So what makes that statement different? Most, meaning what? Not every other, that would be like half. Most is close to what?
All.
Usually is close to what? Is it close to sometimes? It's not, because they're two different things. Most of the time. almost all governments, most of the time, are not practical at all. So a large majority of the governments that we have serve no purpose. All governments, look at the difference. This is like every single one, are sometimes, what is that close to? Yeah. Inexpedient. Most governments, most of the time, are useless. All governments, though, at some point are useless. So even the perfect ones that we're saying are not in the most, they are at some point useless. So, what is the basic assertion that Thoreau is making? Yeah, there is no practical need for a government to govern. Again, he is not an anarchist. Like, I've had kids that are like, oh my God, he wants to overthrow the government. No, he still believes in those founding ideas. Look at all we did just for one paragraph, like 3 sentences. Don't you miss these days? Okay, let's start at the bottom and work our way up for definitions. Stop complaining. We're only on page 2. You got 5. I could have given you all 15. We only got through, this is really only through like the first 3 pages of the whole document. This is the other 15 pages. So stop complaining. Work from the bottom. What are things that we need to define?
Alacrity.
Alacrity. I would say enterprise. What else? Den. I would say impose because it's used twice in this sentence, right? So when I'm going back, I would look at impose because it's used twice within the same sentence. Den. Yep, vitality. We've already defined posterity when we read Susan B. Anthony, but we can do it again. There's one word that I think is really important. Okay. It's kind of funny, the word that y'all are skipping. What is that word? Integrity? We probably need to look up that definition. Thank you. Probably be good for us to understand what integrity means. All right. I'll be throwing shade all semester. All right, so I'm going to look through endeavoring, posterity. I laugh that y'all are like, oh, we got to look at the definitions. How the hell do you get through difficult stuff if you don't know what it means? Oh, wait, I know. You cheat. All right.
I got it down.
Okay.
Trying hard to do or achieve something.
Okay. Try hard to do or achieve something. All right.